Good afternoon. My name is Karli Eisenberg, and I'm a member of the Committee on Appellate Courts of the Litigation Section at the California Lawyers Association. I am here today on May 6th with Colette Bruggman, the Assistant Clerk Executive Officer of the Court of Appeals 3rd Appellate District, and we are here talking about appellate oral argument in the era of COVID. And so just to reiterate, we are speaking on May 6th, 2020, recognizing that things could change. So to begin our discussion, I thought we'd start out with from the beginning, and was just curious, at what point did the 3rd District make changes to oral argument practices in response to the pandemic, and what were those changes?
We had oral argument scheduled for March, and we held oral argument in March except for the last day that we canceled. Initially, we were going ahead in person, practicing social distancing and setting up the courtroom for people to be apart. And then after I think it was the first day, the court determined that we should do telephonic. So after that, we posted that any attorney could make a request for telephonic, and absent exigent circumstances, that the request would be granted. That lasted maybe a day, and then after that, we just mandated that all the oral argument would be telephonic. And then we canceled the last day of March, and we canceled all of April. So that's how it evolved.
Got it. And so, yes, I noticed that all the arguments were canceled for April. And what's the plan for May, sort of now that we've seen, with all the arguments being canceled in April, looking forward and seeing that this might be going on for quite some time?
So oral argument is going to resume in May, and we currently have posted that oral argument will be telephonic. We have scheduled all of the canceled cases from March and April in the May calendar. We've actually expanded the May calendar to add a couple of days, so everything now has been reset.
Great. And as I understand it, the 3rd District is not, this isn't the first time the justices have heard some cases telephonically, is that right?
That's right. In the past, we have had requests for telephonic oral argument, and those have been granted on a case-by-case basis. Typically, when an inmate has a case, a civil case, and they're representing themselves, we have telephonic oral argument with that litigant. So it is not completely unknown to them.
Great. And then how do you anticipate the public, or do you anticipate that the public will be able to listen in or to the oral arguments?
Yeah, so for May, we are setting up a listen-only line and currently working on instructions on how to access that. And as soon as the instructions are ready to go, we'll post them online. So members of the public can call in to the listen-only number.
Wow, that's great. I know some of the districts and the California Supreme Court have begun using video conferencing for oral argument, and I'm curious whether you anticipate the 3rd might do the same.
So we're currently in the process of developing plans for video conferencing, but there's no determined date at this time. We're still working through the processes of that.
Okay. So I anticipate some attorneys would be familiar with telephonic appearances, it being permitted in trial courts at least, but might be less familiar with the video conferencing. Maybe you don't know, but if you are moving to the remote oral arguments, do you know what software the court is planning on using, and what testing, if any, is done in advance to make sure that the lawyers can be seen and heard when arguing?
We really haven't worked all of that out yet. I mean, we're still building the infrastructure to support that. Once we have that in place, we will evaluate the different types of platforms that might be available, and we would anticipate using similar processes to other courts, and we will do plenty of testing to make sure that everybody can get connected and that the technology works as we would expect for an oral argument.
That's very reassuring for advocates.
I'm sure it is.
Do you think that the justices might have a preference? I know it sounds like you haven't begun with the video, but is there any type of indication that the justices would have a preference between telephonic or video? And would an advocate then strive to use one over the other?
So I can't really speak about the justices' preferences. With the experience with us not being in video yet, and that's still being developed, I don't know that they'd have a preference, but our goal, as always, is to provide access to justice and to continue hearing cases.
So what is the process, I suppose, for conducting the arguments telephonically, as that's being worked out right now?
So there will be instructions sent out to each of the attorneys appearing in the cases, both for them and for their client, should their client want to participate on the listen-only line. So we're going to do that on a case-by-case basis. Everybody scheduled for May will get that notification as soon as it's ready. Then how it will work is currently the bailiff will call the attorneys prior to argument. So you won't have to call in and then be on hold all morning waiting for your case to come up. The bailiff will call you and give you the phone number and the passcode to call in. And then you will call in, and once all the attorneys have joined in the case, the presiding justice or acting presiding justice will call the case, and it will proceed as normal from there.
All right. That seems relatively seamless, or that sounds like it would work out.
It's worked pretty well so far. That's pretty much how we do it, so that we don't have everybody just waiting in the queue for their case. We just call them case by case.
Great. Well, you have already answered my next question, which was exactly that. What happens if an attorney gets disconnected while calling in to the court?
If somebody would get disconnected, the instructions that they'll receive have their telephone number and passcode, and you would just immediately call back in to that number. And then it also has an alternate in the event that that line is busy, that you can call the alternate number and join back into the call.
Okay. I'm sure every attorney's worst nightmare that would happen, but suppose have to be prepared.
Right, exactly.
Do you have any tips on what lawyers can do to present themselves best telephonically in terms of landlines or microphones, camera placement doesn't apply just yet, but anything like that?
So for telephonic, we have been thinking about that here. Even before COVID, we've been thinking about how telephonic could be a better quality. And so we put together some guidelines, or really some tips and tricks for people to look at. And we've posted those on our website, but I will go over them now for you, just so people can be thinking about it.
That'd be great.
So the first thing we'd suggest is call from a quiet place that doesn't have a lot of background noise. And then turn off the sound on your other devices to make sure that they're not beeping or notifying you of things coming in. And then try not to make any noise by shuffling paper or typing try to resist, do multitasking while you're participating in an oral argument. We do suggest, if you have it available, that you call from a landline. The connection is typically better. And then also remember that sometimes your home phone, if people still have it, I know that's not the norm anymore, but if you have your phone connected to your internet, just remember that's not necessarily the same. That is still going to be using your internet connection, and so your bandwidth may become a problem. If you're using a cell phone, go to an area that has good Wi-Fi, and don't move around unnecessarily. Like, don't be walking around in your backyard, perhaps, and just stay close to your Wi-Fi. Test your phone prior to oral argument. Make sure that that it's working and everything is going well. Really important is be on time. The court will call you at the phone number you've provided, and they will call you at the date and time scheduled that you got in your oral argument order. And so make sure you are there and available when the bailiff calls. When you're speaking, speak directly into the phone or the microphone, and consider using a headphone, noise canceling headphone. Don't put your phone on speaker. When you're talking, identify yourself, because remember, people can't see you. speak more slowly, clearly, and with sufficient volume. Pause regularly to see if the court has any questions or comments. Keep track of your time, and when your time is up, stop talking. And then when you're not speaking, you should put your phone on mute, but don't put it on hold, because hold will insert music most likely into the proceeding.
Great, those are really helpful tips and tricks. I hadn't thought about several of those things, so that's really helpful that the court provides that guideline. How are the justices, how have they been responding to this prospect of remote oral arguments, and are they looking forward to having any of the arguments conducted via telephone or video?
Well, it's really important to the justices to protect the public while maintaining access to justice. We've conducted, like we've spoken about, telephonic oral argument in the past, so the justices are accustomed to it as a means of hearing cases. Video oral argument would be new, although all of the justices have used video in the current COVID situation, so they're all familiar with it. They've been very supportive of the use of technology to accomplish the work of the court. The main objective, again, is to provide access to justice and continue hearing cases.
Great. And I suppose, have you noticed any changes to the number of requests that people are perhaps requesting to continue oral argument rather than do the telephonic oral argument, or any uptick in requests of that nature?
No, there have not been any increase in the request to continue oral argument or advance oral argument to a different calendar. In fact, most of the attorneys have been very agreeable when they've been told we'll be doing telephonic oral argument.
And I don't know if there's really an answer to this, but do you anticipate how long the remote oral argument might last? Is the court thinking, preparing for up to July and August, or?
So currently we're planning for May and June to be done remotely. July and August, I think we'll make determinations as we see more and hear more about what's happening with the shelter-in-place orders or the stay-at-home orders, and other decisions are made to open up the court. So at this point, May and June we're planning for remote, July and August to be determined, and then beyond that, we'll know more then, I guess.
Yeah, it's certainly an evolving world.
Right, exactly.
And I suppose you answered this. So are the oral arguments, the members of the public can call in, and so that would be sort of a live stream nature, that the public could listen in as it's taking place live.
Right, they can use the call-in. They will be able to use the public call-in number. We are working on plans to live stream at some point. Those just have not been fully developed yet, and so it won't be for May. But we will have the public call-in line available.
And then is there any plan to post the oral argument so that if folks can't call in at the time of the argument, they might be able to access it later? We haven't really developed any plans for that. Of course, anybody wanting a copy of the oral argument can request that from the court and get a CD of the argument, because the audio is recorded, and that's a $20 fee for that. Okay, great. And then sort of looking forward, do you think that this experience is going to open up the possibility of more participation by video and audio in the future, even when we're back in the world where you can appear by person?
I think that the preference will always be for live face-to-face oral argument, but the court will have a growing awareness and appreciation of the potential for remote oral argument presented through various forms of technology. And so, who knows?
On that, do you have any last parting thoughts or recommendations, or tips for advocates, or anything else you want to share with the public?
I would just say that you're still at oral argument, and everything you would do to present a case in person are the same things you would do to present it telephonically. Remote or otherwise, you're still in a court proceeding and requiring all the decorum and professionalism that you would present if you were here in person.
I couldn't have closed better myself. I think that's great advice. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing what happens in the future with the court.
Yes, thank you. It was nice meeting you, Karli.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.